Bilderbergers are about the need to control the money supply and to control the energy reserves. Money ultimately loses its value if there is no energy, and as we're coming to the point where we are running out of that energy, especially oil, if we're talking about a curve, here's the infinite growth that all the corporations require in a capitalist world, it meets with a finite energy supply, so one of these two things have to give. So the idea behind each and every Bilderberg meeting, especially in the last 30 years, is to come to some kind of a consensus, what I call the aristocracy of purpose, between the European and North American members of the group on best ways to control the ever-dwindling energy supplies, because again, money and energy, they work together. And all the other things that take place just form a part of this intent to control the energy supplies.
Is it possible that there is a manipulation going on in terms of peak oil in order to fulfill another agenda?
Well, if there is, then the world is surely acting like we are at peak oil. You know, all the things that you see going on all over the world, you know, to an untrained eye even, you could talk about some kind of a financial or energetic cataclysm taking place in a world where so many nations are fighting for the same thing. It's no coincidence that in Africa, out of the 30 wars, 32 wars taking place on a continent, 32 wars are energy wars, and the epicenter of all these wars is Sudan, and the epicenter of Sudan is Darfur. So in the United States, or all these groups talking about Save Darfur, that's just, you know, a facade for what is really, really going on. Again, the Bilderbergers aristocracy of purpose. They're not the only organization. They work hand in glove with the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations. They work together with International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, European Central Bank. It's the money elite working on ways to control the population in the age of peak oil.
Hemos hecho un compromiso.
The case in Iraq in 2003, it was a question of philosophy. The Europeans simply wanted to postpone the war because they're afraid of the European revolt, because in Europe, tens of millions of people came out on the street to say no to war. You didn't have that in the United States, so to the same extent. So the Americans wanted the war immediately, which is September, October 2002. Europeans wanted it postponed indefinitely. They finally come to a consensus to postpone it to February, March 2003. Again, it's the aristocracy of purpose. Two groups of people for the last 54 years, and over the course of history for the last 500 years, been working towards a goal of destroying the concept of nation states, destroying constitutions, subjugating the human race. And again, it's not a conspiracy. If you may, it is a systemic conspiracy, but there's a very, very clear-cut and easily identifiable system in place that puts all of these elements, from media control to government control to energy control, together into one apparatus working together effectively towards its final goal, which is, you know, global control.
Si eres barco, yo soy vela. Si eres agua, yo soy río. Si eres llama, yo lamento. Nadie habló de enamorarnos.
Was articulated in a Bilderberger meeting.
That's right. We brought it up. It was in 1996, and literally, I think 6 months later, it was sold, broken up into 5 different corporations, and sold off. The common premise is that the governments rule and make up the rules. They actually don't. It's the men behind the curtain that do all the ruling. And the men behind the curtain, people such as David Rockefellers of the world, and the Rothschilds and the Queens of England and so forth, their idea is control of not only natural resources, but all the corporations, which they do, which is, again, why Bilderberg is a systemic conspiracy, where you have the governments, where you have the private entities, corporations, all run by the same people, whose shareholders are members of the same elites and the same organizations working together. If you can take away, such as in the case in Ontario, something which belongs to the country and take it and put it in the private hands, you suddenly control the energy supply. So no matter how you look at the whole thing, the end game is oil, the end game is energy. If we don't have energy, money ultimately loses its value in every sense of the word. The idea of globalization will again go back to the idea of nation states. By destroying nation states and destroying borders, creating regional blocks, suddenly the goods go from one end to the other. But there's another hidden side to it as well. By having the Mexicans do what the Canadians are able to do much cheaper, you're reducing the standard of living, and also it allows, it precludes nations from being free, being independent, in a sense that, for example, in Russia, a long time ago, the only thing, or in Canada, the only thing that we didn't have in this country were bananas. In every other way, you're absolutely, self-sufficient. Right now, in the United States, a car is not made in Detroit. An engine might be made in Detroit. A body might be made in Canada, and then you have, the tires made in Mexico. This assures, the global elite that no nation can strike out on their own against the wishes of the New World Order. I think that's basically is what the concept, their concept of globalization. That's not what they're selling the population, but that's certainly the idea that they have behind what globalization stands for. Well, Iraq is just a card. I mean, although many Americans believe that the war in Iraq is going badly, actually it's going according to plan, not according to the soldiers' plan, but according to the plan of the New World Order and of the man behind the curtain. If you want to destroy a nation, there are two ways to do this. One, you can carpet bomb the whole thing, but that would not be very, very effective, especially if you want to extract oil or whatever other minerals these people may have under their feet. Another far more effective and subtle way of doing the same thing is getting the two sides to kill each other off while you supply them guns and butter, you close them, you give them the loans, you make money on war, you make money on these people killing each other off. That's exactly what they're doing in Iraq. That's exactly what they're doing in Basra, and that's exactly what they're doing around Mosul and Kirkuk. That's the area where the Kurds apparently have their uprising. They've been baiting the Turks for the last God knows how many weeks and months. Sooner or later the Turks are going to react. And when they do, the Americans are going to go in and secure the zone for their control. It's about oil, it's about energy, and every step all of these nations are taking over the last 5 or 6 years, especially with the onslaught of peak oil very, very near. Saudi Arabia peaks in 2014, and when they peak, the world peaks. That's basically it. If you don't comply, if you don't play the game, you don't form part of the world elite. Every presidential candidate, every president, not only in the United States, but in Canada, prime minister or leading oppositions, in this case, Stéphane Dion, who is the leader of the liberal wing, he was a Bilderberger in 1998. The same goes for every European nation. Anybody who is in any position of power, or they play the game, or they just don't get anywhere. It's a trade-off, and once they're in, they're controlled. Some of them get discarded, such as the case with John Edwards. I don't think he's going to go very, very far. He's made his bid in golden stick, so he's out. Others get promoted. It's just a question of who gets to be in the right place at the right time. But they certainly have an incredible eye for selecting useful candidates who may fulfill their roles in the future.
With regard to their notion of population numbers, what would you say that the Bilderbergers' conception of a proper number of people on the planet would be?
I don't know what it is, because I don't think, people talk about 99% genocide rate. I mean, I don't have these numbers. I've never seen them. I don't think people who talk about these rates don't have ever seen them either. I think it's all hearsay. What I do think is, again, historically, if you look at the energy supplies, before, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, around 1820, the world's population was 1 billion people. That's around 1820. In 1930, it was 2 billion people. In 1960, it was 3 billion people. In 1970, it was 4. 1974. In 1987, it went up to 5. In 1996 or 1997, it went up to 6. Now we're almost at 7. So we're looking at exponential increase, 10 years, 1 billion people added to the planet. If we don't have the energy, this planet will probably go back to the way it was in the pre-industrial revolution, which again, 1 or maximum 2 billion people. That's what it would be able to support. That's the supporting capacity of the planet, I would think, historically and scientifically speaking.